in base R, you have to use the aggregate function in order to create summaries by groups, which I'm going to just show real quick just to show you the great part about dplyr. So if I pull that help file on the aggregate function, look here how complicated this is. So you have to, every time you have to put whatever value that you are that you want to look at, you have to put the by groups, and I believe that's in a list. So you have to remember that the variables are in a list, and then you have to put the function that you want to use, and then if you want that in a matrix and not a list, you have to put simplify equals true, and it's just a mess. So in order to make that easy, the creators of dplyr created a way to do this. That is much easier. So in this case, you have to use a multi-line piece of dplyr code. So we're going to start with our original .df. We're using that pipe as we saw before. The first thing we're going to use is the group by. So inside of this group by, you will want to put the grouping variable, and then we want to put the pipe. So we would then want to use the summarize. And I'm going to show you another situation where we might want to use mutate, but almost exclusively the summarize we will want to use that. It will create a mean of groups variable. And then if we use the mean function, our variable of interest, and if you have NA values, you have to put NA.rm equals true. So just a little bit more about this, and there actually should be a second parenthesis in that. If it wasn't, it would throw an error. So you'll, as most of you already probably know, the mean function requires the na.rm to equal true if we have NA values. So whatever function you use here, and oftentimes it is going to be mean or quantile or something like that, if that particular function requires an na.rm, you have to put it in here, or it's going to evaluate, I believe, to na, or it might throw an error. I'm not sure which. So keep that in mind. It'll be obvious when you do it the wrong way, because it will not return what you want. So that's another reason why we always check, because this is easy to forget, especially if you haven't been coding that long. So inside this summarize function, the only functions that we can use are the functions that are going to return one value for each grouping variable. If you wanted to have something that returned a different value for each row, you have to mutate. And in this case, it's going to return that one value for our mean of groups. So I'm going to come in and show you what that looks like, because it is a little difficult to understand. So in this case, we're grouping by unemployment HML, what we just created up here. And I wanted to put, so when unemployment is high, medium, or low, in this case, I'm summarizing the amount, the percent of adults that are on public insurance. So we're finding the mean. And then when the percent on public insurance that are children, we're finding a mean of that as well. So I'm going to run that and open it so you can see what it looks like. So if I go to our public health insurance, see I have, and this, if you use the summarize function, it would return this value, just FYI. Every function works differently, and in this case, this one will return an NA, and the reason it does is because we set this as an NA and it's a character value as well. So you have to look on a case-by-case basis when you're using a function, as you said, to see if it will return NA, or in this case it does. So in this case, we're seeing that when unemployment is high, we are having that 24% of adults are on Medicaid. When it's high, there are on an average 50% of children on Medicaid. Reason for that, I used to work in healthcare, so for most adults, it's usually women or the primary caretaker of a child is I know I used to work in Missouri, so I believe you had to be 12% of the poverty line for an adult, and you had to have a child if you were on Medicaid. And then for children, I believe that value, and it might have changed since I worked on this, but it was, I believe, 250% of the poverty line. So there are different thresholds for adults versus children. So this would be CHIP. Just a little bit of background info. So when unemployment is medium, you'll see that this adults on public insurance is low, the average is lower. So the children on public insurance. And then when unemployment is low, it's also lower for both of those values. And I'm going to show you real quick, because this is something, if you ever work with census data, you're going to want to know this. So I am going to pull up this data set. So unemployment and food stamps. So along the way, the government changed FIPS codes for 2 counties. Depending on when those FIPS codes were pulled, and obviously I just pulled this data very recently. So I'm going to go and scroll down to where there'll be NAs. So it's actually not showing I thought it would, but there were NAs. There should be NAs at the bottom. So in one of my data sets, there were, I think it's towards the end of the class, but there are 2 particular counties. If you're looking at census data, you're going to want to, actually, I do know. So we're gonna, just for the sake, I'm going to go over how to do all these individual pieces of code in a second. So this data uses the new FIPS codes, which is why I wasn't finding it. So for instance, if you sort, you'll see that there's no NAs for the public insurance. However, and I'm going to show how to do this in a second, I merged in rural versus metro for that, for those FIPS codes. So this is what I was attempting to show. Anytime that you use census data, you have to keep this in mind, because the rural.metro, their codes created in 2013 by the government, and I believe the Department of Agriculture makes those, but they were in 2013. So you're seeing here that the census values are not missing, but always look for these particular values. Take note of this if you ever use census data. So the FIPS codes were changed for both of these counties. So in 2013, they were different numbers. So when I put them together, oops, NA. So the one is in Alaska and the other is in South Dakota. So that's just something to keep in mind. Has nothing to do with dplyr, but those were a headache for me when I used to use census data. And it's something to keep in mind. So going back up here, so we have that unemployment. So we have our summarized, and when we went in here, we have these values. So as you can see, the only values that are included in this summary are statistics here. So everything else from our original data set is removed, except these values that you're summarizing and your grouping variable. There are a lot of cases that you want to keep the same structure of your original data set, but still calculate a grouped value. For instance, if you wanted to say remove outliers by group, so you wanted to remove anything that had a percentile that was above the 99th percentile. So, and you wanted to do that by group because you were doing a certain analysis by group. This is something that I did very recently, but if you don't keep the original structure of your data set, you won't be able to see or evaluate or compare, I guess, the 99th percentile with the values that you have. So in that case, and I'm going to show, it'll make more sense when I show you what the output looks like. You have to be careful in this because of just, you have to make sure you use the correct group by percent. But when you want to keep the original structure of your data set, you can do the exact same thing with the summarize. You can use mutate instead. So what that'll look like, and that'll really help. So if we look at our unemployment food stamps, it's 3,142 observations. Our result from this is 3,142 observations. So we'll go in here. Let's open this up just so we can see. So we did this high, medium, and low category for unemployment. That was our grouping variable, I believe. So I opened the wrong. I need to extend this. Okay, so this is our correct. I apologize. So go in here. This is the grouping variable that we used. It keeps, and there are the same number of rows that we inputted, but you'll see here that the median values all have the same value. High values have another value. You'll see that they're the same. And then if we scroll, we can find a low value. You'll see that those are the same. So we would use this in a case where we had to say use this unemployment percent variable or one of our other variables, but we still wanted a summarized variable. This is easier to do than doing a summary and then joining the data back with your original data. It's just more, it's an optimized piece of code. So that is complex. Are there any questions about that? Awesome. And this is something that you would be able to use in order to create a graph. So actually, a good thing to know is that if you know ggplot, if not, I'm going to do another class on that not too long from now, in the next couple of months. You can actually chain a dplyr graph to this code. When somebody makes a package, they can say whether you can chain it with dplyr or not. And most packages allow you to do that. So that's just another fun fact for information. So going back into our PowerPoint, this is the example I just showed. So I tried to explain in more detail. So you can go back and see that.